Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, a historic verdict.
Donald Trump was found guilty on 34 charges of falsifying business records in connection to hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels.
How will this impact his presidential campaign? I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take. Donald Trump was quick to react to the verdict, speaking at Trump Tower in New York City on Friday morning.
This is a case where if they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone.
He then appeared on Fox News for an exclusive interview.
These people are sick. They're sick. They're deranged. I talk about the enemy on the outside and the enemy from within. So you have Russia, you have China, but if you have a smart president.
My name is Kimberly Halkett. I am Al Jazeera's White House correspondent.
Thank you, Kimberly. Welcome to The Take. So there is no doubt this is momentous news, right? First president ever to be criminally convicted. There was so much coverage of this trial, so much back and forth and uncertainty and argument. But in the end, the jury was incredibly decisive. So can you just take us through what happened on Thursday, how the verdict came down?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are kind of confused about what the president was charged with. He was charged with falsifying documents and records, and people are confused about why there were so many charges. But the bottom line is there were 34 counts that he was charged with. It was for each payment that he made to Stormy Daniels through his attorney-turned-fixer, Michael Cohen. And so each one was considered a count.
Prosecutors presented Cohen's bank statement showing the $130,000 he wired to Stormy Daniels' lawyer on October 27, 2016, just 12 days before the election.
Each one was considered a separate offense. Each one was considered something that could be punishable. And so the prosecutors were very deliberate that they wanted to make sure that not just the jury, but really all of America saw the full scope of what Donald Trump had, in their minds, done wrong. Donald Trump had paid an enormous amount of money to Stormy Daniels, disguised as legal fees to Michael Cohen, to essentially not discuss that he had had an affair with Stormy Daniels. And so that's what's historic about it, is when this came down, it was pretty shocking. And the debate is pretty much about, is nobody above the law, or is this political persecution? And that's where people are divided. And so we saw that immediately outside the courtroom. There were people yelling and there were protests. And what was also dramatic is how the president himself reacted. You know, he walked out and he was walking through the streets of New York City and waving, and people were, cheering or jeering, depending on which side you were on. And that was something remarkable because it was an historic moment. And it was something that people had never seen in the United States before. It's significant not only because we had never seen it before, but it also has an impact in terms of how Donald Trump's other criminal and civil cases will play out. Now he's a convicted felon. He lacks credibility in the future. And also, it could affect his sentencing.
Let's talk about that sentence. Donald Trump will be sentenced on July 11th, which is just a few days before he accepts the Republican nomination. Let that sink in. So the question I keep getting, and this is the elephant in the room question, is he going to be incarcerated? I mean, what are you hearing? Is Trump going to jail?
Well, it's possible he could be sentenced to go to jail, but it's unlikely he's going to go to jail right before the Republican National Convention. And here's why. Because he has the ability to appeal this, and he will appeal this. And so as a result, he's likely to go out on bond, which means he'll be free. And he is likely to appeal this all the way to the Supreme Court. And that will take years. And we've seen this playbook from Donald Trump before. He is the wizard when it comes to manipulating the legal system. In fact, that's what he's done up until this time. This is the first time he's ever been caught. He's been, again, a wizard at sort of, jurisdiction shopping. And this is the first time he wasn't able to do that. And so he'll be able to do that again, and he'll be able to draw this out. So it's not only going to work in his favor, because we should mention that he smashed his fundraising records in terms of, I believe it was $35 million that was raised just the first day as a result of him being able to play the martyr and the victim. He's portraying himself as a political prisoner or as being persecuted.
This is all done by Biden and his people.
So who is going to make the decision on his sentence, and how could his behavior from here until July 11th impact his eventual sentence?
Well, he's going to be sentenced in New York. And the fact that he's shown very little remorse, in fact, the fact that he has given an interview in the last few days where he said that he's not afraid of going to jail, is a problem. It really is not going to look good in the eyes of the judge, who is going to have discretion to make that decision. And so, look, he is going to be sentenced 4 days before the Republican National Convention. It will be stayed until appeals are exhausted. He will be free on bond to campaign, which means that he can hold rallies, he can portray himself as a martyr, and he's going to have the grounds to appeal. So it's going to take a lot of time, but what that does then is creates uncertainty around his presidential campaign.
Yeah.
It means we don't know how these campaigns will play out, what they're going to look like, what the tenor and the tone of them will be. But what it looks like right now is that the Republicans are capitalizing on this, and Donald Trump himself is capitalizing on this.
What surprised you more, the guilty verdict or the Republican reaction to the guilty verdict?
Nothing surprises me anymore. Nothing in a divided country. There is so little faith in institutions in America now. On the right and the left, there's little faith in the justice system. Each side believes that there is no longer equal justice under the law. And so I wasn't surprised when Republicans came out lashing this, saying that this was selective abuse of the Constitution. It was a political affront to the rule of law. The bottom line is, you see this now on both sides. And so it was almost as if this was expected by Republicans, and they were already communicating their messaging that this was expected to be a guilty verdict. So they were going to call this election interference. And they would essentially say that this was opening the door to a dangerous precedent, that if you don't like your opponent, that you can simply lock them up. And, in some ways, there is some truth in that. We've seen that around the world. What is going to stop the next party from doing the same thing? In this case, it would be the Democrats. It's a slippery slope.
More after a break. So, Kimberly, we're talking about this Republican reaction. Some of the rhetoric is incredibly concerning. I mean, overheated doesn't even do it justice. For instance, Tucker Carlson, former Fox News host and conservative commentator, he tweeted, quote, "Anyone who defends this verdict is a danger to you and your family." This is deeply personal, stoking fear, stoking division, all because of a jury verdict. Didn't go Trump's way.
Right. So maybe this is me probably showing my age. There was a time when I would have been very alarmed by this. And It's not that I'm not alarmed, because this is dangerous rhetoric. There's no question about it, because it does stoke fear. It does stoke division. But I guess I'm maybe becoming numb to some of this because I've seen it for so long, that these words are starting to become empty. And it's starting to become like white noise to a lot of Americans, because you can only have so many crises, and they continue to just try to keep ramping up the American public. But the American public is exhausted. They're trying to pay their bills. They're trying to put food on their table. They're tired of politicians' antics. And so these things used to work, but they're not as effective as they used to be. There's no question that Donald Trump and those who follow him are trying to whip the public into a frenzy. But I'm not sure that it's having the same effect that it would have had 5 years ago. Donald Trump is portraying himself as a victim. I didn't do anything wrong. This is being done by a Biden administration to hurt a political opponent. This is a rigged and disgraceful trial. You know, every time he says that, it's designed to make people angry and rush. But that might have worked after Donald Trump lost the election. But that didn't play out very well for those involved with the January 6th election overturning acts and the riot on the Capitol.
That's for sure.
And people are aware of that. It's not going to have the same impact.
Okay, so we've talked about the GOP reaction. I think for the most part, the Democrats have gone out of their way not to appear to be gloating about this news. But it's clearly going to be an issue. How do you think Joe Biden and his campaign are going to use his opponent's criminal conviction against him?
There's no question that this has been deliberate. There has been a deliberate messaging that has been sent throughout the Democratic Party to keep this understated. Do not gloat. But at the same time, they have wanted, and this is something that Joe Biden has been doing for a while now, is try to portray himself as a contrast, dark and light, law-abiding and criminality. And so Joe Biden has said that democracy is on the ballot. He said that even before Donald Trump's conviction. And he's playing that up even more now. And we saw that he came out a couple of days after the verdict and said, no one is above the law. And for Donald Trump to be claiming that this was rigged, that this was a sham trial, is reckless, it is dangerous.
The American principle that no one is above the law was reaffirmed. Donald Trump was given every opportunity to defend himself. It was a state case, not a federal case, and it was heard by a jury of 12 citizens.
And he pointed out that Donald Trump was subjected to the same judicial process as any other American, a jury of his peers. And to claim that this was anything contrary to that is simply irresponsible. But he's a politician. He's also used this to fundraise. And so essentially what he's trying to do is take the moral high ground, that he is a sitting president, he has the dignity, and using that as a contrast. And he did it from the White House, which gave him the edge, of course. And, ultimately, the final judgment will be in the hands of voters on November 5th.
Look, one of the advantages to this from the Biden campaign's perspective is that it's so hard to get anything to break through, ever. And this is something that broke through. So I want to read you this quote. Stuart Stevens of the Lincoln Project, he tweeted, "Donald Trump is a felon. He joins his campaign manager, deputy campaign manager, national security advisor, foreign policy advisor, political consultant, and personal lawyer as felons." When you read that, you get the sense that criminality is almost a feature, not a bug, for this campaign. Now, I know that the Trump campaign wants everyone to think that this conviction helps them. And look, the fundraising numbers are jaw-dropping, as you mentioned. But do you really think doubling down on being a convicted felon is a winning political strategy in 2024?
I think it might help Donald Trump in the short term, but not the long term. And it won't help the party. And that's where we already are seeing some distancing. What we're seeing is in the down ballot races. We're seeing Republicans who can't defend this in the down ballot races. So in other words, Republicans at the state level or at the local level. How do you defend that? You can't defend it because nobody wants a criminal running their police force or to be their sheriff or to run their school board or to be in their state legislature, you name it. So if you're a Republican, you can't support this. And so that's why I'm saying Donald Trump might be able to make this work for him, but it won't work for anyone else. It may have caused him to have a brief blip on the radar, but again, Americans have a very short attention span, and it's a long way until November. And I don't think that this is going to have the momentum that he thinks it does.
Kimberly Halkett, thank you for coming on The Take today.
Pleasure is mine.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Khaled Soltan and Sarí el-Khalili, with Tamara Khandaker, Duha Mosaad, and me, Kevin Hirten, in for Malika Bilal. It was edited by Noor Wazwaz. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer. And Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.